Bonjour and hello, I'm James, and I'll be your host for this season of the Everyday Forum podcast, an original Stratfest at Home podcast showcasing a sampling of the thought-provoking discussions from the Stratford Festival's 2024 Meighen Forum. The Stratford Festival's Meighen Forum is a festival within the festival, designed to enhance and contextualize the performances in the main Stratford Festival season through compelling discussions, small-scale, exciting performances, and engaging multi-sensory events and workshops. Enjoy! Bonjour and good morning, everyone. My name is James Hyatt. I'm the Meighen Forum assistant. I'm very glad you've been able to join us this morning for our second event in our Scholars and Experts weekend here at the Meighen Forum. This is titled Censorship and Artistic Expression. And this topic of censorship is pertinent to this time of year because this Monday is the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. This is a federal holiday to recognize and to remember the children that were sent to residential schools throughout the 19th and 20th centuries. This program by the federal government was a program to quote remove the Indian from the child, sort of to erase the indigenous Canadian cultures and languages and identities. And this can be seen as a very extreme form of censorship, especially when you consider the suppression of cultural practices in relation to other laws and bans by the government, the potlatch ban in the West, the ban of the Cree Sundance. These were cultural and, importantly, religious ceremonies that were suppressed to the detriment of Indigenous cultures. Now, those bans have been repealed. The Indian residential schools have been closed. But we're still working to revitalize these cultures, these languages. We were lucky enough to have a Métis elder on this stage last weekend talking about that. And if you've seen The Diviners, you've seen some examples of the beautiful Métis jigging that is sort of being revitalized there. So just wanted to make that connection to the topic today in acknowledging the land that we're on, in recognizing the all the things that it gives us, in recognizing the Indigenous nations that have cared for this land for generations, that being the Mississaugas and the other Anishinaabe nations, and the nations of the Neutral Confederacy, and in giving thanks to them, and in giving thanks to the artists and storytellers and dancers that have also been caring for this land for generations. So, she's not currently on screen right now, but I wonder if we can... There we go. Achiro, joining us remotely, is Achiro Olwoch. She hails from Gulu in northern Uganda. Achiro is currently living in exile in New York. She's currently Weiss International Fellow and Scholar at Risk at Barnard College. She's an award-winning writer, director, and producer after winning numerous awards and nominations for her Coffee Shop TV series as creator and writer, and Yat Madit as head writer, and for her short films The Surrogate, The Mineral Basket, and Mariah Nee. Welcome, Achiro. Furthest from me in the physical realm here, Ashley Tucker. Ashley is the co-founder and co-executive director of Artistic Freedom Initiative, leading the planning and implementation of its programs, operations, and legal services for at-risk artists. Ms. Tucker has previously worked for the United Nations Human Rights Committee in Geneva, the Robert F. Kennedy Center for Justice and Human Rights, and the Center for Civil and Political Rights. She's worked on strategic litigation before the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, conducted research and human rights training in Haiti, and worked as a volunteer in El Salvador and Nicaragua. Ms. Tucker received her BA from the University of Arizona in Studio Art and her JD from City University of New York School of Law. Ms. Tucker holds certificates in Arts and Cultural Heritage Law from Georgetown University Law Center and in Nonprofit Executive Management from Tufts University and the Institute for Nonprofit Practice. And she's admitted to practice law in New York. Welcome, Ashley. Next to Ashley is Elizabeth Wijaya. Liz is an assistant professor in the Department of Visual Studies and graduate faculty in the Cinema Studies Institute at the University of Toronto. She's the director of the Southeast Asian Seminar Series at the Asian Institute, Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. She's the associate producer for the film Taste, 2021, co-producer for Mongrel, which was at the Cannes Film Festival this year, and associate producer for Viet and Nam, which was also at the Cannes Film Festival this year. She co-founded E&W Films and co-edits World Picture Journal. Welcome, Liz. And right next to me is our moderator for today, a fantastic performer who I've had the pleasure of working with. You may have seen her in Kat Sandler's Bang Bang, Ted Witzel, Lulu V7, How Black Mothers Say I Love You, We Are Proud to Present Prince Hamlet, or you may have seen her at the Stratford Festival this year as Lady Clapham in Something Rotten. It's Khadijah Roberts-Abdullah. Welcome.
Thank you so much, James. Yeah, that was a beautiful introduction and a reminder of the many forms of censorship, the many modalities of censorship. You know, it isn't a new concept. It's been present in societies across the globe for centuries, whether motivated by religious ideology, political indoctrination, or an execution of power. I would say that some of the recent instances of book banning throughout Canadian and American school systems are a prime example of the types of artistic censorship that are becoming more common. In 2022, the American Library Association reported an unprecedented 1,269 demands to censor library books, nearly double the previous year's number. And a little closer to home, in February 2023, Action for Canada, a BC organization with chapters across the country and a strong online presence that promotes conservative ideals, demanded that libraries in BC and Ontario remove books discussing sexual orientation and gender identity, like Genderqueer by Maya Kobab or The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison, her first novel. They accused Chilliwack's public school libraries of housing some books that depicted child pornography, which is a claim that the RCMP investigated and found no basis for. Along with book banning, drag story time, a popular event that's meant to foster understanding and share diverse perspectives between drag performers and children in an age-appropriate manner, has come under scrutiny by conservative ideologies with claims that it's being used to indoctrinate children. Book bans and other sweeping actions of censorship are a true manifestation of a political power struggle. Most would agree that art is a tool for educating the masses. An opportunity arises to elicit empathy when one is confronted with the lived experiences of those who walk a different path than their own. But when BIPOC individuals or members of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community or anyone from a marginalized group is silenced, that opportunity is stifled. So I'll turn it to our panelists now to ask if each of you could talk a little bit about the work that you do and describe the types of artistic violation or consequence you've experienced along your creative path.
I feel like I would, Achiro, can I do this to you? Can I ask you to, because I know your story and it's so compelling, and I feel like if you would share that with the group, maybe that would really set the tone for the rest of us to talk about the work.
Sure. So my introduction says I'm from Uganda, but in exile in New York right now. And I'd like to talk about the reason why I'm in exile. And it's as a result of my work that I used to do in Uganda and the censorship around that piece of work. So there's a rule, a law in Uganda by the Media Association that bans any works in the themes of LGBTQ and or political. So, and most of my works were in those fields. In particular, a particular play that I wrote that did have LGBTQ themes, as much as it was watered down. So there was nothing like holding hands, nothing as simple as that. But in Uganda, that is extreme. Even just the idea of writing two men holding hands on stage is extreme. So that was really watered down. The men did not come together or anything. There was just talk of them being a couple. Anyway, so I got onto the radar as a result of this play, and I was attacked in the street in 2017, 2018. And I was hospitalized and horizontal for most of the next year. When I recovered, I did another documentary that also had LGBTQ themes and came under fire for that. I got lots of warnings for it never to come out and things like that, and warnings that I would be outed as being a promoter of homosexuality and things like that from anonymous, using anonymous sources like on social media or even via email and anonymous phone calls. Anyway, long story short is I finally got out of Uganda, and that is why I'm actually in the US right now. So that has been my journey as concerns this particular theme of censorship. So yeah.
Ashley, do you want to talk a little bit about how you and Achiro found each other?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think firstly, I should probably share, the mission of my nonprofit and what we strive to do. So we're a New York City based nonprofit. We're led by human rights and immigration attorneys, and our mission is to provide pro bono immigration representation and resettlement assistance for international artists who have experienced persecution or censorship or other restrictions on their free expression, and often have been forcibly displaced as a result of that. So our legal work looks like, as lawyers, filing asylum claims, various visa petitions for artists, both performance and talent-based, some humanitarian visas, et cetera. We do work authorizations for the artists once they're in the U.S. so that they can continue to earn a living through their craft. Our resettlement work really looks like any number of things from, helping a newly relocated artist to open a bank account or sign up for health insurance, understand our very complicated tax system, things that those of us who have lived in the U.S. our whole lives still struggle to understand. We run a residency program as well, of which Achiro was also a part. It's based in Manhattan and is able to provide housing and tailored professional development to the artists in our network so that they can continue to grow their careers and frankly, embed themselves in a brand new industry and community of creatives. New York City is notoriously a very competitive place, as I'm sure you all know. So we try to do what we can on that front. And lastly, our third program is really, and maybe this is relevant for this group here especially, is about creating platforms and opportunities for the artists in our network to showcase their work. So we produce festivals and events. I am a lawyer, but I was a studio art major in college, so I get to wear my curatorial hat when we plan and produce events, which is wonderful. And it's really a great joy to be able to help the artists in our network put on and showcase their work to new audiences and engage them in new ways. And lastly, I guess our advocacy work is a relatively new thing, and I think I'll probably have a little time to talk about that later. But that's really about telling the story of what's going on in countries around the world where suppression of artistic freedom and illiberalism is on the rise. So I'll be happy to talk about that later on. But Achiro, who I have known and adored for many years, how long has it been, Achiro? 2018?
No, 2021.
2021? Really? Oh my God. It was the pandemic times. We don't even know what year it was, right? Yeah. Well, Achiro's been part of our network for a long time, and I'm super proud that we've been able to work alongside her through our legal services, our resettlement work, and we've been big fans and champions of her producing her work around New York City and elsewhere. And she's just a joy and brilliant, talented human. So I was really excited to get to be in conversation with her today and all of you.
Achiro, how did you know who to turn to as far as your relationship with Ashley and her work?
I didn't actually. My coming to the US was one, I had a valid visa that I'd gotten in 2019 for something else. And then I had a friend who lived in New York, and I asked her if I could just because around that time I was being hunted. I'd say hunted because there were cars that kept on coming around my housing estate while I was getting all those threats. And that was around the period of time that we were also having elections, and many artists were being uprooted or how would I say abducted from their houses and being taken to unknown places. Anyway, so around that period of time, I was afraid for my life, and I asked a friend of mine if I could just come to the US to breathe. I had no intention to stay, didn't know how to stay, if I was allowed to stay or anything like that. But because I had a valid visa, I just asked her if I could come and just take a breather. So I did. I came, I lived on her couch for about a week or two. And then we got talking when I could talk, because I was really shaken up. I didn't even realize how traumatized I was until I'd actually gotten to the US. Anyway, so I got talking with her and another friend of mine that actually also went through Ashley's hands at AFI a couple of years before. And we known each other from Uganda. And I was just telling her, oh, by the way, Amara, I'm here because of ABCDE. Have you heard about what's happening right now and the like? And she's like, oh, you should talk to the Artist Freedom Initiative. And that is how I got to know about AFI. And that is how I got in touch with Ashley. My application was approved, and we got a talking, and that's really how it started. Because I had no idea. I didn't even know about if there was a way I could stay in the US. All these conversations really started after I got in touch with AFI.
That's wonderful that you were able to find one another, and that you were able to find your way first to the US and to a sense of safety. And thank goodness for your friend and all of those points along the road that, I'm hoping I can be so presumptuous to say that you are in a safer place now. Elizabeth, I'd love to hear from you in a similar regard as to how your creative process began.
Yes, so I work, my full-time job is a professor, and I also work as a film producer. So as a professor, I teach courses on migration, on queer cinema, and I teach on political theories, generally pertaining to cinema, particularly cinema of Asia, but transnationally, and also in a very thinking very globally. So a few years ago, I held some forums during the pandemic on inter-Asia experiences of censorship that I co-hosted with my friend in the University of Minnesota Twin Cities, Palita Chunsa-Ing-Chan. And for those series of forums, we invited filmmakers across Asia and also other stakeholders, including academics, who to come and talk about the different, and also film festival programmers, right, to talk to us about the forms of censorship that they experience, how they've navigated it, or how they have studied it. And so, I mean, that's from the academic side of my work. I'm very interested, right? That as you mentioned, right? Censorship is about power. It is about control, and together with the creative side of my work, I always want to focus on what are the possibilities that remain, right? What still can be done without I guess in a way without giving up, right? But so I think in all aspects of my work, we undertake very careful assessments, right? Whether I'm inviting someone to come and speak, or whether I'm speaking, or whether we are in even the very, very early stages of developing a work. So my film production work generally involves films that are shot across Southeast or East Asia, and where within Southeast and East Asia, there's very different forms of censorship, very different forms of precarity, or what is possible or not possible. So it's a bit different from what Achiro was just talking about in terms of generally speaking, there are less the direct threats to the filmmakers physical well-being, like less for a lot of the context. But that, I mean, just recently I held sometime this month, right, I held a panel on co-producing cinema, and one of the filmmakers talk about something called filmmakers jail, right? That we might not go to jail, but we go to filmmakers jail, where we are all alive and well and good and just walking around, whatever. And then that more, in a way, covert form, right? Where maybe you don't get funding, or you're under high pressure, you cannot shoot. So you're physically still in the place, but there are so many reasons why you are not able to shoot, right? So, and certain academics have also talked about academics who want to study contexts that remain sensitive, can also face pressure in terms of like the scholarship, people who could talk to them. And so, I mean, one thing that I want to say, right, was that, so even talking to all of you, right, there's, I find that there's always this contradictory position of there's so much that I want to say, right? I want to speak to an audience, but I must always be very careful. And so there's an ongoing practice of self-censorship, and not because I don't want to assert myself, not because but there's always this question, right, of there's the legal forms of censorship where you can read documents and you know where the line is and be like, if I go here, these are the consequences. If I don't go here, those are, right, what I can do. But there are also other forms, so especially as someone who works as a producer, who works as an academic, so where it's not just about me, so it's also about the projects I'm involved in, where we are always very attentive to the different kinds of situations, right? I mean, filmmaking, as we all know, is a collaborative endeavor, but it's not collaboration with equal power, right? It's not collaboration with equal precarity. So we are always very careful about who's the one in the group that perhaps when a film is being shot or after a film is being released, who's the one that might perhaps need the most, that we need to be the most careful about. So that's the general gist of it for now.
I find that fascinating, this idea of filmmaker jail. And, you know, I think you went on to describe a sort of personal jail that we put ourselves in as creatives. I'd love to hear more about the process of creating art under the looming threat of censorship, whether that threat is, you know, directly physical or political, and how your creative process has been affected by the consequences of your past work. Maybe Achiro, you can go first.
Yeah, sure. When I when I came to the US, I didn't realize how censored I was mentally until I actually started to work, because physically I was free, so to speak. But then each time I would be trying to create work or even look through the works that I'd created and try to edit, I'd catch myself and actually feel very afraid in terms of, oh, this is forbidden, I shouldn't say this. And then remember, oh, no, here you can actually say it. But it took me a while, because the same play that I got ostracized for in Uganda actually got produced here. And the first time I remember when I was going through it, I kept catching myself, and it took me a while to actually write what it is that I wanted to write, how I wanted to write, because I didn't realize that even in my head, I was still afraid, I was still censored. And that took a while. But anyway, going forward, my process is a bit freer now. I'm still learning to uncensor myself. I won't say, oh, now I can just write, because at the same time, I keep thinking about whatever it is that I'm writing about. And because I'm writing about many things that happened in Uganda, that are still happening in Uganda, I still catch myself and many times tone it down, because I worry about my family, about my friends, about the situation that I'm trying to talk about. So in a way, I still find that I am censoring my work, as much as there is a level of change in terms of the amount of freedom with which I actually now create. So the process right now it's a lot freer, yes, but I'm still learning to uncensor myself, even being in the US.
Yeah, and I'll just tack on, Achiro, to what you shared and saying that experience I feel is very common among the artists that, that we support in AFI's network, wherein they may have relocated to the States, but there is still significant concern, understandably, about family, friends, loved ones who are still in the home country, and though they may be able to do what they'd like here creatively, they have to be concerned about what could happen to the folks who are still there. And I think that very much informs a lot of the creative process of many, many of the artists that we work with, definitely.
I think, in short, in my work as a film producer, I always have an ethos that it is not up to me to decide how much danger an artist should be in, right? So I will never be the person who want to be like pushing somebody to go there, you can do this, right? Because if I'm not the one who's going to suffer the brunt of the consequences. And at the same time, even if someone says, I will do this, I can do it, right? And we consider it our duty to, in a way, to anticipate and even guess, because a lot of it is almost like high stakes guesswork, because you can never really know what could get by and what could not in certain situations. So in terms of like, okay, if you were to do this, these are the possibilities of what could happen. And if these things will happen, like what are the plans we have? I think so much of it has to do with this question of exile is something that actually a lot of filmmakers do, that they could do consider and anticipate. So we work with people who are not living in where they were from, who may feel like because of legal reasons, because citizenship reasons, that they feel like, okay, we are in a space where we feel like we could say more. And there are people who are still living under the context who are like, I want to do all these things, right? But then we have to be more careful. So one of the things that we do is also we rely on our networks. We rely on really networks of solidarity. And I'm always very, very careful not to give power too much power, not to give power too much credit, right? Because I don't want to say, because of censorship, that actually, there's really all these creative strategies, there's all these solidarities that develop. I don't want to give that too much credit. But at the same time, I think that across so many contexts, we hold on to the fact, right, that is like I say, censorship has been going on for a long time, and for a very long time, artistic people have found a way, right? They have developed ways to say things. They have developed ways to for the intended audience or reader to be able to say what they want to say while navigating different kinds of consequences.
Yeah. Can I add just a little bit to that?
Please.
More recently, I did a short film, and it was following the lives of three artists, two from Uganda, and me being one of them inclusive, but me being in exile, another one still in Uganda, and another artist that is in Kenya, and just following the process of how they do their work. Anyway, the reason I brought this up is when Liz talks about being mindful about the different artists and how much you can put them in how much you can put the power that you have in terms of protecting them, or how much you might put them in danger. I saw this happen with this film in that at first one of the characters, especially the Ugandan one, he was ready to be a martyr. He was like, no, go ahead, show my face. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, tell my story. I'm willing. I mean, yeah, I don't mind. But at the same time, we as the filmmakers on this other side did not want to be responsible for this man being a martyr, knowing, especially for me, because I was the director of this film, knowing the real dangers of what could happen to him if this film actually got out. And as a result, we ended up having cartoon characters to depict this, just to protect them. But at the same time, because we had real crew that was shooting back home in Uganda, and I asked a couple of friends who I knew I could trust with this, because I mean the theme was LGBTQ, but just to talk about in terms of safety, both of them, both the Ugandan and the Kenyan filmmakers, requested at the end for us to not put their names under the credits for security reasons. So it goes even as far as the crew, as in the fact that you worked on this LGBTQ themed thing would actually get them in trouble or get them not hired by different people. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Yeah, I wanted to tack on to that too, Achiro, and thinking about this kind of this notion of censorship, maybe that's government sanctioned or that's cultural or that's self-censorship, and this idea of exile. I think, it is interesting to consider that we do work with artists who are coming to the US or are already there and know that they will be staying there and not going home. But we do also work with a lot of artists who are not interested necessarily in applying for asylum for any number of reasons. It's frankly a very difficult and very long process that, our immigration system in the US is extremely broken. But, we also do performance and talent-based visas, which are temporary. They're non-immigrant visas. So they would allow for the artists to travel internationally easily, to go back to their home country if they felt that they wanted to. But we have seen instances sometimes where an artist will come to the US to engage in, a fellowship or a performance or a project and have the freedom to create work there in a way that maybe they didn't at home, but then realize that the work that they were creating there has now likely closed the door to their ability to go home. And then they have to kind of, change tacks and decide, how is this going to look for me? So it's all very nuanced. And of course, every person's case and circumstances are different. But I just wanted to mention that that's a self-censorship thing that can happen even when you're already in a country where allegedly you have free expression. So,
as if there isn't already enough to think about while you're creating, while you're in the creative process, to then have to think about, the dangerous consequences of what it is that you're articulating and giving voice to. So it makes me think, just based on, this last few words here, is there any part of you that's driven by defiance? How do you continue to speak from a place of honesty when, as I imagine it, this sort of pressure, that external pressure that comes from, that's attempting to stifle your artistic voice, it seems to me that there may be an anger, a response to that makes you want to say what you have to say with more gusto or determination.
Yes. Yeah, right now, to be very honest, especially now when, like I said, I'm better at uncensoring myself. I think every single piece of work I create right now is from a place of resistance. Is from a place of defiance. It's from a place of deep-seated anger, whereby I'm like, I am in a position, because it's almost like I have a mantle on me that makes me feel like I am in a position where I can tell the stories or talk about things which other people cannot. So it's almost like I have put this mantle on, or I have this pressure on me to go ahead and tell the stories as is, So yes, right now I think almost every single piece that I write, that I create, that in whatever piece of form, does come from a place of defiance, and I do get to write it in its entirety as I want to write it. So
yeah, I think that's also very familiar to me, Achiro, with many of the other artists that we work with too. Often the reason that they are in the position that they are in their home countries is because they were and are artist activists. So they're socially engaged, politically engaged. They're making art that, is incendiary. And I think, we know that there are really no modern social justice or other movements around the world where art hasn't been at the forefront. So, that this whole idea is really why we founded this organization, was because we believe that art is resistance. Art can be made in defiance of the things that one wants to fight back against, and that art is an incredibly powerful tool to create positive social change. So that kernel is really at the foundation of why we do what we do. And personally, I am also in defying the notion that all lawyers are bad. So,
Thank you for that, actually.
When you mentioned defiant, I think what I work with is a very kind of quiet defiance, a very sort of long-term, enduring, as patient as we could be, defiance. So, whether in the university or in the film productions, like my partner and I, we try to, I think we think about, we're creating like conditions of possibilities, right? And we try to hold on to those conditions. And, and so frequently that there will be setbacks of different forms. And we just try to keep going on, or just be very, very committed to the people that we've agreed to work with. And so in film production, we are not actually thinking about censorship as the foremost thing. In fact, it's the thing that we are very conscious of. But so some works that we work on have no obvious issues with censorship at all, right? So for us, it's not so much the politics, but the art, right? So we center the art, we center the artist, and then it's a case where, like, if this is a story, we mostly work in fiction. If this is a story that you want to tell, this is the way you want to tell it, and we believe in it. We believe in the importance and beauty of this story. We think it's important, right? And then we are like, okay, how are we going to get it done? Is it possible? And what are the obstacles? And if we can take this on, it means that we will stay with it, and we cannot promise we'll definitely get it done, but we can promise we won't give up halfway because of whatever obstacles, right? So because we are not in a position that we're like independent producers, I need my regular money paycheck. So again, it's a very different image of film producing, that we are not in a position to say, we promise you this will get done, but we can be in a position to say, it's a defiance, right? That we are not thinking about profit, we are not thinking about fame or so many other things, right? We're thinking really about the future, right? We're thinking about, these are the conditions of the present, and this is the audience of the present, all of which is very, very important. But we want to hold on, right? To say, look, if we can get this done at this point in time, we're not thinking about who's here to watch it now, who doesn't want to watch it now. But once it is there, then hopefully, right, some of this will be there for somebody who will see it, and who will be able to understand like what this work is trying to do.
That's a beautiful thought about the impact of what you're doing, of what you're creating, and regardless of the consequence of it in the present, the future impact that it will have on those who identify with the work that you're creating, and the safety that they may find in hearing that story being told, when it's likely that in every other aspect of their life, that I'm thinking mostly about the queer community, and how in so many parts of the world, it's there are no stories that share those life perspectives. So this small act of defiance, whether you I love that you call it quiet defiance, Elizabeth, that it will have an impact. And so I wonder, what do you think? I would love to hear about the feeling of being silenced for speaking out about social or political norms, either in your own community or throughout the world at large, and how you take that feeling and infuse it into the work that you're creating.
I'll let the ladies in black go first.
Achiro, I think this is an artist question.
I mean, it's an artist question, but I would love to hear, how you position yourself in alliance with the artists that you work, Ashley, that you work with, and whether you witness any of that throughout their process.
I mean, absolutely. And I think if I look at the way that we designed the programs that AFI operates, the legal, the resettlement, our public programming, which is called Artists for Social Change, and the advocacy work, I think that this was our approach, this sort of holistic approach to try to meet the artists where they're at any stage of this process. And often they come, to us first with legal requests, because that is often the first barrier or obstacle that someone might face if they're trying to relocate. But as in Achiro's case, she was already in New York. So though we did work with her on her legal case, we also were able to start working with her on the resettlement. So the idea is that we are trying to walk with the artist through each stage of the process. And ultimately, this is in service of trying to support them to get back to the creative or to engage in a new way. And there is a lot that folks are processing when they're, at any stage of this process. Achiro already spoke a little bit to that end. And I mean, truly, we work with folks who have been jailed, who have been tortured, who have had family members killed. It's very serious business. And in order, I think, for an artist to feel like they can get fully engaged again in the creative process, they need to feel that their legal status is stable, that they know that they have a roof over their head, that they have a work authorization that's going to allow them to buy groceries and their MTA pass and, all of these things. So, this is really what we are doing, what we feel we can with our expertise and our resources to ultimately help get the artist back to the creative process.
Hmm. And Elizabeth, you mentioned earlier that you, in regards to Defiance, that you're not trying to censor the artists, the filmmakers that you're producing alongside. But how do you deal with that sort of the consequence of defiance, or rather the consequence of that pushback, and whether people, the sense of defeat that an artist may feel based on the consequences that they faced in the past, and the ongoing pursuit for creativity.
Thank you. So I think in response to your earlier question on silence, right? So now speaking as a researcher, whether it's people who have studied, whether it's people who have been through traumatic experiences, or people who have studied kind of art in the different historical contexts, I think that there's really a way in which sometimes, even when like direct verbal speech or direct representation is silenced, there are other ways, right, that speech can be possible, whether it's through the body, whether it's through artists working in more abstract manner. So as a researcher, I'm really interested, and also and it helps my film producing work in sort of cultivating ways of listening, right? So listening not only to direct speech, but also ways of listening or perceiving, right? The many different strategies. So for example, there are many examples of like Southeast Asian cinema that some people have say it could be a bit slower, or could be a bit about like, why did it take a half-hour detour to something else altogether? Why can't it just tell a straight story, right? And then so I think not all the time, right? Because there's many reasons why artists do some things. And sometimes it's also about what are the other ways, right, that I can communicate something, whether it's just down on the level of memory, right? Because I think in the Asia context, there's still this question of some forms of Cold War memories having to do with communist histories being quite taboo. And also taboo is like this other thing, right, that might not be direct censorship. But so I think silence is actually very important, right? So, and then back to you, like what to do when working with people, including like myself, right? Moments when you might feel this sense of heaviness or defeat. Again, I think I find it very important that I'm not I don't want to be that kind of motivational force that pushes people where they don't want to go, or myself. I think it's important, right, that there are times for things, and there are times when people are ready for certain things. And if working, whether as like a researcher, whether as someone who sometimes I've interviewed people, and I can be like, maybe this I don't need to publish now, I can publish later, I can publish something else now, right, for the now, and I can say some things for like some decades later. Or whether an artist wants to do something else altogether. So like I said, we don't want to focus on the political, right? We are aware of it. We know that it is very much like different, like you said from the beginning, there are different modalities, there are different forms of censorship, and they can be very haunting and very present. But we really want to focus on what is possible. And sometimes the possible thing to do for the specific person under specific circumstance could just be to take a rest, right? Could just be to do something else and to be patient. Of course, it can be frustrating, but I think it really depends on what a person is ready for at that point in time.
That's beautiful. I think it's so important to just remember to take a pause at times. Achiro, how long did you take a pause? I know you mentioned there was some time for you to even acknowledge the traumatic experience, the impact of the traumatic experience that you had undergone back home. What was that pause like for you when you arrived in the U.S., and how did you find your way back to your artistry?
Because I come from a culture of silence where people do not complain about whatever is happening in their lives, especially women. You're supposed to be very strong. And my tribe in particular, the Acholi, we're supposed to be really strong. And anyway, so I didn't even realize how much trauma I had been through until I actually got to the US. And I'm a busybody in terms of creating and trying to do stuff and trying to create things. And one of the first things that I was trying to do was, because I had a level of anger in me in terms of how did I get here to this point, I started doing research on colonialism. How did this law, the anti-homosexuality law, come to Uganda in the first place? Why did it come? How did it happen? I just had to start thinking about things like that. But then at the same time, I didn't realize that it was almost like digging me into a deeper hole, because then I started to get extra depressed. But I didn't realize I was going through depression. And I thought that throwing myself into my art was helping. But at that time, it really wasn't. It's only after I got into the program with AFI and started seeing a therapist. Mm-hmm. It was interesting talking to the therapist and then realizing how broken I was, or how fearful I was. Like, I had no idea. Seriously. It was just almost like, because coming in here, it was like an outer fear, oh, now I'm safe type thing. But I did not realize how much it had affected my inside. And it took a while. Leave alone, as I'm talking about, yes, the censorship and all these things. It took a while for me to actually get to a place where I can actually sit down and really think and really create, and not just from a place of, say, anger or desperation or I need to create something, but from a place of being an artist that's just really thinking and wanting to create something that I want to create from the place that I want to create from. It really took a while. There are times even now that I still go through periods of time when periods of depression. And yes, Ashley is right when she talks about how the program that they have that helps an artist to feel safe in that your rent is taken care of for a period of time, your paperwork is being taken care of. That really helps. I realize the times when I'm in turmoil in my head is when all that part is shaken. For a period of time, yes, I'm not worried about my paperwork, because I know that is happening. It might be slow, the process, because of whatever system is happening, yes. But then in terms of having a living as an artist, the times when I am shaken the most or feel the need to really create is when I am at my lowest. And I realize it almost comes from a place of fear. A place of uncertainty. That is when all the trauma comes back in terms of what if asylum is denied, what happens, and then you're thrown back, all these things. So all these fears keep coming and going, but at the same time, it also helps shape or direct my creations as a result. More recently, I began writing from a place of being an immigrant in the US and what that entails. So in many ways, the ups and downs actually do inform creatively, but it is a lot easier when you're in a place of calm or safety.
How wonderful that Ashley and AFI and organizations throughout the world can offer that sense of safety and a bit of relief so that you can focus on rehabilitating yourself and rehabilitating your creative practice.
And I just want to add too that we all benefit from that, obviously, you know, like as audiences, as folks who want to learn from artists like Achiro. So that is, you know, it's not just necessarily out of the goodness of our heart, but rather because we believe that the creation of this art is very important and is a contribution that we want to make sure continues. And Achiro's voice is certainly among them. So, yeah.
So a notion that I had is that an aspect of contemporary art censorship points towards a strive for accountability. Both Beyonce and Lizzo released songs over the last year or so that were called out by disability advocates and were pressured to change the lyrics to both of their songs because they used outdated language that many deemed offensive. I wonder, do you think that censorship provides any opportunity to shift the relationship between an artist and their audience for the better?
Sometimes. I struggle with that a lot because many of the things that are now that are now unacceptable, so to speak. Even little words like, for example, referring to somebody as overweight, or overweight is actually polite, say fat, or, you know, like different wordings. My culture, those words are very, not necessarily acceptable, but no one frowns upon them. So I have found almost a shift in culture in terms of creating, in terms of rewriting, in terms of language and what is acceptable to use for this audience that I'm actually writing for now has been a challenge for me. Is it you asked in terms of censorship, is it, I don't know as an artist. Because as an artist, sometimes I also feel like I'm being put into a bottle in terms of what I can or cannot say. I personally, as Achiro, I hide behind the fact that I am Ugandan and we can say these things in our context. And that helps me. It helps my writing, because if I'm going to think about all these extra things that I am not able to articulate because of another culture of censorship that has risen up in terms of what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable, then I wouldn't be able to say 10,000 things. It's not like I'm trying, like when I'm creating, I'm trying to insult anybody. No, I'm literally just trying to tell a story the only way that I know how. And yes, I think my culture really does help me in terms of being able to almost escape those little censorship things that are happening right now. Although I am mindful, there are certain things I will not say in respect, and we'll talk about the modern censorship in terms of all those other things that you cannot mention. So, but then I am mindful. But yes, I also do take advantage of where I'm from to take creative license of what I can say and what I can't.
I think very quickly, I'm just really thinking, but like the larger question, right, is autonomy, right? The larger question is about freedom of expression. And I think that for me, the difference is between different kinds of power. For example, state power, consumer power, audience power, and the different forms of power have different forms of expression of those power, right? So, for example, in the Beyonce example, that ideally there can be a space for rigorous debate, or like you're saying, it's about accountability to the artists or to the musicians who want to use certain words, want to provide a narrative to justify it, or do they want to perhaps say, okay, I don't want to, in fact, I want to change, I want to adapt to whichever is the prevailing norms, right, of that context that they want to speak to or sell to. So I think there's a difference between that, because I'm not of the I think it's always most exciting, right, when an artwork is debated, right, and it's debated in a way that there's a certain level of like minimal physical safety, right? That hopefully Beyonce is feeling, right? But so I think so. It's very different from, I think, the most insidious kinds are covert or arbitrary forms of power that can be enacted upon you, right? It should be very different from when you as an artist is called to be in a somewhat at least promise to be free type of debate to say, okay, you have done this. Would you like to justify yourself? Would you like to say why you have done this?
Yeah, I think the pathway for conversation is it's a freeway at this point in society with social media and the internet at large. So I do think Beyonce's okay. I think Lizzo's okay as well. And many, of these very forward-facing personalities. I think that, personally speaking, my perception of it is that they are, now we're getting into a bit of a conversation about cancel culture and what how that functions as a form of censorship in and of itself. I think that in its best forms, or in its healthiest forms, this conversation allows artists to become more aware of the impact that their work has on people. I don't think anyone is, Achiro, like you said, intending to elicit harm on their audience. And when someone says, ouch, you've hurt me, the correct response is, I'm sorry. Can we talk about why that hurt? Yeah. Anything from you, Ashley?
I mean, I think you all covered it really well. This is obviously such a complex question. And I think from my perspective, I mean, running an organization that is founded on our belief in free expression as a human right, I think accountability is important. I think conversation is important. I think art as a catalyst for dialogue and change is important. I think, as you all are saying, the ability to rethink something or reframe something is all part of this. That said, free expression is not an absolute right. Mm-hmm. And if we look at the UN's International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights, for example, it stipulates that free expression is free up until the point that it begins to incite hatred or violence. So I think from an organizational perspective, we have to look at it, because when you ask the question, about changing for better, it's like, who's better? Right. And it's a slippery slope, right? So while personally I may agree with a lot of this, if those same words are coming out of someone else's mouth, like it's, so it,
Yeah. I have one more question, but I feel like I should, this is a very
oh my God, that's a lot
stack.
Of questions, you guys.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I'll leave my question to last in case someone else here has covered it. Thank you for all of this. This first one asks, what is an artist at risk? A phrase mentioned in the introductions. How do you balance differences in legal and cultural rules for different places for transnational artists?
I guess that was for me. I mean, organizationally, we try to define the word risk as broadly as possible. I mean, this looks so many different ways for so many different artists, and each person's experience is different. So, I mentioned at the top, persecution, censorship, forced displacement, or you're from a country that's currently in the midst of violent conflict, a humanitarian crisis, for example. So this can look political, it can look social, it can look cultural, it can look financial even. So I think we really try to do our best, as I said, to construe the concept as broadly as possible so that we are able to offer our services to as many artists as we possibly can.
Beautiful. I think this one's for you too. Are you directly engaged with any of the oppressive countries of origin of your clients?
Directly engaged. I mean, no. We are U.S. immigration attorneys, so our legal work is based in the United States. We we are currently releasing a series of human rights reports that focus on the state of artistic freedom in various countries around the world. Thus far, we've released reports on Hungary and Poland, just recently Afghanistan and Iran. We're about to release one on Nicaragua. These really dive deep into what's going on in these countries and with these governments with respect to how these governments are utilizing legal and bureaucratic mechanisms, often, many of which are very insidious. And it's astonishing really to see what these governments are doing. So we are studying this. We are trying to put this out into the world. We, through legal analysis, are creating policy recommendations for regional, national, international bodies. But to say that we would be engaged directly with any of these regimes, no. Certainly, our funders would be having none of that. So at the very least, that's a deal breaker.
And you said these are public reports that will be available.
They're on our website, artisticfreedominitiative.org. So they are very long, y'all. So settle in. They're like 100 pages. But it's great stuff. And importantly, we really work hard to highlight the artists themselves and do interviews with the artists to talk about their experiences. How has this looked for them? And really learn from them and their lived experience.
I'll just quickly share one of the factoids that I came across in my research for today's panel, just in regards to what you're mentioning, Ashley. In Venezuela, where there's been an ongoing socioeconomic and political crisis, Tampa Calzadilla, a former investigations editor at Últimas Noticias, Venezuela's largest circulation newspaper, resigned in protest after anonymous buyers took control of the paper, and a new editor demanded what she considered to be politically motivated changes in an investigative story about anti-government protests. So I came across numerous reports of this kind, and it seems to me like this is exactly the type of thing that you are combating. Yeah, so thank you for that. Trying diligently, I'm sure. Next question here. Given the censorship in your home countries, how aware of your work are those in your home countries? I guess it's for you, Achiro and Elizabeth.
For me, I do try and keep in touch with especially friends who are tolerant of who I am. I guess tolerant is not the right word to use, but who accept me or accept my work. But at the same time, I still do share my work on social media, and those that many people. This is one thing I have realized concerning my work and my home country, that even people who are, should I say, neutral or maybe support you, will not offer you support on social media because of the fear of being aligned with you. So people are aware of the work that I'm doing, but very few of them will either support or go against it, I should say. But yes, in many ways, they are aware, at least via social media, because I do post my work and whatever it is that I'm doing.
So say in general, the work that my company has done has traveled internationally, generally at film festivals, and some of it there's international distribution. So we don't actually work with like a concept of a home country. We really, because we are working with filmmakers based in different parts of the world, films are shot in different parts of the world, and we navigate each one differently according to the different possibilities of release and distribution.
How many different countries are you involved with at this point?
I would say quite a lot.
Yeah.
But generally within Southeast Asia and East Asia. Yeah, Southeast Asia.
Very wide ranging.
So this year we have 2 films that were shot in Vietnam that were released. One that was shot in Thailand, Singapore, and one that was shot in Taiwan. Yeah, for this year.
And because I haven't said it yet, congratulations on Cannes.
Thank you.
Next question here asks, from the discussion, I hear the word power. It sounds like we need to become political and to create a political party to champion art and freedom. Hear, hear.
I mean, I'm with it. But I think from the U.S. perspective, in terms of thinking about politics and power, at least from within the scope of what I feel AFI can do, that is to continue to advocate for improvements in the immigration system that will make the experience of an immigrant artist more livable, more sustainable, and to think about how we can protect artists specifically, like creating a visa for artists who are also human rights defenders and activists. So how can we think creatively about leveraging the existing systems to create new protections that would support the art and artists?
That sort of relates to this next question. Given the rise of populism and illiberal policies globally, how can artists, writers, filmmakers, and actors, directors reach younger audiences when social media forums promote ignorance, fear, and uniformity?
Different ways, I think, is also reaching out directly to different school programs that do work with freedom of expression. And then also there are a couple of organizations that I personally work with. One of them is PEN America, that does have a freedom of expression department, and they invite me to different schools to speak about my experiences. And these vary from elementary schools to high schools and colleges. So for me, that is the avenue with which I get to speak about the freedom of expression and my work.
It's beautiful. It sounds like you're creating a school to artist pipeline through that. So thank you. Why do authoritarians care so much about control and artists, or do they really care at all?
I mean, I think they care because they're threatened, right? I mean, that for me, that's ultimately the thing. Artists create work that reaches so many people, and the power in that in itself is a threat to anyone who doesn't agree with those messages. So
I think Margaret Atwood said not too long ago, right, that like the pen is not mightier than the sword, because artists only have influence, they don't have power the way, for example, a state can wield like the sword, right, over the artist. So I think it's a way, it's true, this question, they care but they don't care, right? It's sort of like that. It's about, if you're talking about authoritarian regimes, it's about power, the ability to exercise power, and perhaps precisely not caring about the artist at all.
I mean, Achiro, can I ask you, in your experience in Uganda, why did you feel that they cared about the work that you were making?
I think because art is far-reaching, and the work that we were doing, my play was being presented in a theater setting. I think it's also because my work was going places, because other than it just showing in Uganda in terms of the play, the particular play, I did have films that were showing at Berlinale, at Gotten Awards, in Nairobi, in Ghana. And there was the more recent film that really got me into trouble had gone all the way through to Cannes. And all this information does come down to the media. Because we are a small country, our media, our international reach is quite small, so word gets around. So I think it's because it was going international, and that in a way posed a threat in that, not a threat per se, but it angered them in that I was being given a platform for something that they found vile. In a way. So, and that was forbidden in Uganda, but I was being given a platform elsewhere. And I think that's what put me on the radar. And that's what got me attacked and stuff.
How dare you be so successful?
I think it's interesting, though, Achiro, you bring this up, because I think something that we've seen often is both, as you say, that when your star rises or when your work is getting some attention, then the government suddenly, or whomever, state actor, private actor, religious authorities, whatever the case may be, the eyes are suddenly turned to you. And simultaneously, I have seen that at least when the artist is able to leave, the ability to maintain that profile publicly and have news articles written about you, or, people celebrating your work, it also can serve as a form of protection, because a government is less inclined to do something terrible if you are suddenly someone now whose name is all over the news, So there's a bit of this double-edged sword experience, I think, that some artists have.
This is... brings something up for me. What has the response been since you've been in the U.S., has there been any sort of attempt to quell your work or silence you from afar?
Yes, especially the first 2 years when I was here, I still was getting those not necessarily calls because my phone changed, but those emails and those, I still do get anonymous people following me on social media, and I know them as government bots. So yes, I still do get people that are interested in what I'm saying or why I'm saying it or where I'm saying it from. That's why another reason that even being in exile, not everybody, for example, not every Ugandan that is abroad thinks liberally. So at the same time, you don't necessarily have I don't necessarily have a Ugandan port of contacts, because at the same time, half of them could be spies, so to speak. So yeah, so it's still far-reaching in many ways.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I also wondered whether you were able to find, whether you were aware of, whether directly or indirectly, of other artists from Uganda in a similar position as yourself.
I was, and through different friends, interestingly, through American friends, not even through Ugandan friends. So some of my friends would be like, "Oh, there's this artist. I don't know if I could introduce you." And then that's how I got to know that one, they had found safety in the US, but many of them, yes, were still here, also in exile, and had come either way before or almost at the same time as I did. But I did get to meet a couple. There are very few that actually align with my interests. A couple of other people, other artists or Ugandans in general that I tried to reach out to, especially through friends, when they did get to know the reason why I was in exile or the fact that I'm queer, they pulled back. So there's still that circle of who to trust and who not to trust, and how out there are you going to get, even if it means in terms of trying to get a circle of people from back home.
And for Ashley and Liz, have you recognized any sort of community that has developed around the artists who you've worked with directly or who you've been creating alongside?
I mean, yes. And I think we are, as AFI, also really trying to cultivate that intentionally. I think, artists can be very collaborative, but the creative process can also be very much kind of a solo thing. And part of the reason that we built this resettlement program was because after we were able to work with the artists on their legal status and that felt stabilized, the next question was, where am I going to live? Where am I going to work? And how can I make new friends and build community and plug into the creative industry here? So there was a real desire, obviously, for that, both personally and professionally. So, the artists are obviously doing that on their own and of their own accord. In New York City, there are endless opportunities to do that. But we are actually launching an initiative very soon that we're calling the Artist Community Network, which is a really intentional effort to connect the artists who wish to be connected across disciplines. It's not all just folks who are from the same country or region, but rather creatives who have shared similar lived experiences and would be able to find a real benefit in peer-to-peer support and shared, knowledge exchange and helping each other build networks. So this would be a really artist-led and fed sort of initiative. So.
Yeah, so I think I'm heartened by the fact that across Southeast Asia independent cinema, some parts of East Asia, and also with some of our European partners, we have felt supported by informal networks of solidarity. I think precisely because a lot of filmmakers and independent producers are facing very, even though it might be differences in specificities, there's a lot of commonalities in terms of things that have to be considered, things that have to be dealt with, so we do work with, we really think internationally in terms of whether it's the nationality of what a film could be, or like where something could be shoot, where a filmmaker could go. So for example, one of the programs that we have worked with by France is this Cinema Lib program for filmmakers at risk. It started just a few years ago, it's still ongoing, and then you can apply and a filmmaker can be in France for I think about half a year with a stipend, and then there are different services that are accessible to them. And one of those things about that program that I like a lot is that they don't say, for example, this is the cohort this year, this is the cohort next year. So a lot of, I think, of this solidarity work is also being done, whether by individuals or by institutions in, like I was saying, like quiet ways.
Yeah. Of course, our creativity, as collaborative as it can be at times, is also such an isolating experience, which is then even further amplified, that isolation when you're in exile, or you're worried about the consequence of the work that you're creating. So it's nice to hear that there are those opportunities for a community to be established. We have so many questions left. This one's at the bottom here, says maybe for Achiro. As you walk through this healing journey, would you like to envision a time in the future that your creativity is no longer defiant, but labeled something else? If so, what would that label be?
I think it would be acceptance. And yes, I do envision a time when, and I do try, even as I'm creating work presently, I do try to make it not come from a place of defiance, but create work that is from a place of acceptance. So that it's not just me feeling accepted or wanting to feel accepted, but it's telling stories where people would actually learn to accept, So yes, I think it would be acceptance. That would probably be the word.
Beautiful. Would you please discuss censorship beyond government? What do families of artists say about this extreme risk?
Okay, I'll go first. To begin with, my family ostracized me when I came out. So in terms of my work, I don't think my family are my first. That would automatically be your first point of contact when something new comes out. But my family would never be the first, or is not the first, that approves of my work. Because first of all, they go to find out that I make these works, or that I am about my sexual orientation, through a film, a short documentary that I made, and that led to another can of worms. So no, my family would I think be, or is, the number one pot, or the boiling pot of censorship in my life and concerning my work. So that's my experience where family is concerned.
Thank you for sharing that. Any point of context for you?
This is a very profound question. I'll say the question of family censorship, societal censorship, it's really across the world, right? And then it really cuts across geopolitical questions, right? So whether you're in North America, whether you're in Canada, right? Sort of, it's a completely different assessment of what a person feels comfortable to show or say to their parents or their siblings or whoever they consider themselves to be in a family or even friendship or other relations with.
I'll just sort of echo what Achiro was saying. I think we've seen a lot of cases of artists in various countries around the world whose families don't support them. And if they are making art that is political or is controversial, and, they are coming from a conservative culture and the family is a part of that, I think it's unfortunately a very common experience. So
this next question asks, community is so important and defined often by shared experience. How, as artists, do you find or form new community when displaced? This is sort of related to the question, the conversation we just had, but in case there's anything to add, I will continue the question. How, as artists, do you find or form new community when displaced so that you can continue growing your art? Finding new things or new things to say, is it difficult to trust again?
Or it is very difficult to trust again. For me, at least it was. It was very difficult to live again or to even be an artist again. And it took a while before I wanted to, leave alone I was able to, because I was accorded different communities that were open to receive me as a writer, as a queer person. But then I wasn't ready to share with or be a part of any community. So it took a while before I was in that space where I was able to join these different communities and actually open up and create and with them or just be a part of them. So, yeah.
Thank you.
And I mean, I spoke a little bit about this artist community network, but I'll also say that our efforts to produce events in New York City and sort of in the tri-state area that uplifts the work of the artists in our network. It is obviously so audiences in New York and elsewhere can benefit from learning about these artists and their work, but it also is hopefully an attempt to connect the artists with maybe new communities or audiences and certainly industry professionals that can help to further uplift and showcase the work afterwards. So, community can look all different ways, but.
Can you give us an example of some of the events that you have organized in the past or any upcoming events?
Sure. So we've produced 3 multidisciplinary arts festivals over the years. They are always focused on some theme related to artistic freedom. So the first one was Revolutions and Movements, and that was highlighting artists as human rights defenders, artists who had played significant roles in revolutions like the Arab Spring, et cetera. So we had musicians, visual artists, we had film. It was wonderful. It was my first one, and it was absolutely insane. I will never do that again. But it was a week long. We're doing shorter festivals now. The second festival was really about narrative and about how the power of storytelling can disrupt dangerous norms. So we were highlighting artists who were creating these sort of storytelling and music performances. We did a play, we did a concert, 2 concerts actually. And our most recent one was this last fall. That was called Beautiful Forms, Queer Art Unbound. And we were highlighting artists in our network who identify as LGBTQ+, and we're creating work around those issues. So we had 3 nights of music and film, and I think it was really, I thought it was great. I had a good time. I hope everybody else did too. But yeah,
yeah, those sound fun. I'm sure I would have loved to have been there.
You're welcome next time.
Please, thank you. I love this next question. I love all your questions. Really. Is a teacher telling a child in school what color to use when coloring a picture considered a form of art censorship? Does it censor creativity in that child? Should any mandates or topics, activities be considered censorship?
I mean, someone who works as a teacher, right, in the university and with a child in daycare, I would say it really depends on how that telling is done, right? Like, is it done with like a huge stake, or is it like a suggestion, right? I think that's really because I think if it's done in a way where conversation is possible, that I wouldn't consider every suggestion, right, censorship. I mean, when I teach, I have a syllabus, right, and the syllabus is like, it's like a contract, right? So like a student can just, in a way, doesn't have absolute freedom of, I mean, a student could have absolute freedom of expression, and then I will grade it according to the I'm like, okay, this is what we're looking for, this is what you have done, and this is, right? So I think maybe yes, I mean, that's my response, right? That perhaps I wouldn't call whether something is to be considered censorship really has to do with the question of consequences.
I would toss this to Achiro because I know you also teach playwriting. I had the benefit with my staff of actually having Achiro teach us one of her playwriting workshops recently, which was so much fun. But I would love to hear your answer on that, Achiro.
I think when I put on my teacher hat, I think almost like what Lee said, I think if it comes from a place of almost suggestion and allowing a creative choice, it shouldn't be considered a form of censorship, but also at the same time remembering that there are certain rules maybe rules is the wrong word to use when we're talking about things like this, but there are certain things that are set in stone in terms of how a thing is done. But yes, maybe it comes down to tone or suggestion or allowing a point of conversation or a point of opposition and just taking it from there. So yeah, that's quite a difficult question, I'd say.
Yeah, I think it points to the ongoing conversation regarding the postmarks or the container within which creativity happens, and how large or small that container is, and what external forces are determining the size of that container and how much happens within it. I could sit here and chat with you all day, but we are out of time. I'm sorry for the questions that we weren't able to get to, but I thank you all so much for this fascinating conversation and for the work that your advocacy and your creativity and your voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Khadijah.
Thank you, Khadijah. Thank you, everyone.
This event was recorded as part of the Meighen Forum in front of a live audience in Lazaretus Hall at the Tom Patterson Theatre in Stratford, Ontario, Canada. Be sure to subscribe to keep up with the lively conversations and original performances housed by the Stratford Festival's streaming service, Stratfest at Home. And for making it this far in the episode, we're going to give you a gift. Enjoy 1 month free on Stratfest at Home with promo code FREEMONTH. Visit stratfestathome.ca and enter code FREEEMONTH to enjoy 1 month of free streaming content. It takes you, our listeners, to make this possible. It also takes the support of our dear collaborator. Support for the Meighen Forum is generously provided by Kelly and Michael Meighen and the T.R. Meighen Family Foundation. Original score for the Everyday Forum podcast was provided by Hilary Adams. Production support is provided by the film production and distribution team at the Stratford Festival. That is manager Yash Chabria, film editor Chris von Kleist, and director Jenna Dixon. The Meighen Forum team is producing assistants Renata Hansen and James Hyatt, coordinator Mira Henderson, manager Gregory McLaughlin, and director Julie Miles. Special thanks to Michael Adams, Jennifer Lee, Greg Doherty, Harper Charlton, and Kendallin Bishop. Finally, thanks to artistic director Anthony Cimolino and executive director Anita Gaffney. From here in Stratford, Ontario, on the land of the Neutrals and the Anishinaabe, see you next time. Ba Ma Pi.